Howdy again everyone, and currently there's a bit of a bandwagon rolling for manufacturers to take their macro lenses a step beyond by going beyond one-to-one magnification, particularly low budget manufacturers, and now 7Artisans are joining the party with a new 60mm f2.8 macro 2x lens. This is different from their previous 60mm macro lenses in that it's designed to offer a full frame image circle, not just Aps-c. I'd like to thank the Gear company for sending me one of these for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review and they have had no input into it whatsoever. Its focal length of 60mm is wider than average for a macro lens, making it a little easier to work with, not to mention smaller and less expensive, but as a result, you don't get much working space away from your subject here. The lens isn't too big or heavy for a specialised full-frame optic, and it's tough and metallic, being built upon a metal mount without any weather sealing. At the rear there's a metallic aperture ring with gentle clicks, but with the f-stops spaced out unevenly. Then comes the metallic focus ring. The good news is that it turns extremely smoothly. The bad news is that its focus throw could have done with being a little longer, and thus at normal distances, taking a portrait picture, the focus throw is a bit small, so it's not easy to get your subject properly sharp, although in fairness it's not as fiddly as the Astrahori 120mm lens that I tested recently. For anyone interested, and as usual for a macro lens, this thing suffers from heavy focus breathing, zooming way in as you focus more closely to your subject, which can make focusing close up a little tricky, although as I say, this is normal for virtually all macro lenses. And as I mentioned already, this lens is totally manual, so no autofocus, no camera controlled aperture. The lens has a 67mm front filter size and does not come with a hood, which is a little surprising even for a low budget offering. Neither does it have screw points for macro lights. Overall, the lens's build quality is very tough, although I do wish its focus ring turned just a little more precisely. Alright, let's take a look at image quality now by testing it on a Sony A7R III with its 42MP full frame sensor. No in-camera corrections are available with this lens. At f2.8, in the middle of the image, we see excellent contrast. Sharpness is quite good, although we do catch a little ghosting on horizontal contrasting edges here, which goes away at f4, leaving behind perfect sharpness. As we move over into the image corners, resolution fluctuates, becoming eventually quite soft. f4 and f5.6 only see very minor improvements, and even f8 still looks poor. At f11, image quality finally starts to come together, and at f16, well, that's the best you're going to get on full frame, so it's a somewhat poor performance here, even taking into account that corner image quality isn't so important in macro work. By the way, I did my usual checks to see if the lens was suffering from a curved plane of focus, but refocusing into the corners didn't really bring about anything in the way of improvement. For the sake of completeness, let's test the lens on a 24MP Aps-c camera too. Again, at f2.8, we are seeing good contrast, but sharpness is somewhat spoiled by some horizontal ghosting. Corner image quality is very poor. Here's f4, not much difference in the corners, but the middle of the lens is looking lovely and sharp now. f5.6 looks the same in the middle, but the corners are looking a fair bit sharper now. f8 looks decent and f11 is surprisingly good, although stop down to f16 and it just becomes softer again due to diffraction. So the lens's sweet spot on Aps-c is f11, not much of an improvement over the full frame image there. Okay, let's go back to full frame and take a look at distortion and vignetting. The lens projects rather a disturbing level of pincushion distortion here. Vignetting at f2.8 and at f4 is rather strong, but stop down to f5.6 and it subsides just a little. Another poor performance there though. I should also mention that at extremely close distances, sometimes an edge of blackness will creep into the image corners when shooting on full frame. Not good. Well, let's see about close-up image quality now. At f2.8 we see a fair bit of resolution here, but contrast has become quite ghostly. Stop down to f4 for contrast to shoot upward again though. The lens stays this sharp down to f8, where diffraction causes softness to emerge. Here's f11 for those interested. You don't want to stop down beyond that. So that's a good performance actually, but I wish contrast was better at f2.8. Also troubling is this lens's work against bright light, which is below average. As you can see, the lens picks up tons of flaring and glaring, making me wish that 7Artisans had provided a hood with this thing. Anyway, let's see about the quality of this lens's bokeh now. It's a little on the nervous side in transitional zones, but deeply out of focus backgrounds look nice and soft here. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. It's very low on this lens. Some colour fringing is slightly visible on bokeh highlights at f2.8 and f4, but stop down to f5.6 and it's mostly gone. Overall, well, you've seen the results for yourself. This lens did not do well in my tests at all. While it can still get you some very nice extreme macro images if used correctly, even considering the lens's low price, it's quite a weak optical performer.